Our words are powerful and affect the perspective from which we view our lives. Everything we say is training our brain to look for that in our life. What kind of world are you creating with your words? Hello, everyone. Happy Monday, or whatever day it is that you're tuning in to us on the couch.
My name is Lextopia. Welcome to the couch. Here with CC Fierce
/ Carlie Carpio on Twitter. I actually tried to switch over my Instagram so it's the same, but then I didn't have the password, and so now I can't use my name. It's just like a whole
You didn't
bunch
have the password to what?
Well, I did it. I signed in, but then Instagram did this the extra verification thing, and it kicked me out. And then I
verifications are kicking my butt these days. They be doing so much. I just want to get into my email or whatever platform without having to have 20 codes going to old phone numbers or places you can't access, or go to your other device and look at this. And it's bro, it's interesting that we're super connected, but also it's it's unfortunate that we have to have so many precautions in place, I guess, for people trying to get into your account and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. And Google definitely be coming for the jugular anytime you sign on anything new. They ready. Right. They hitting up your email, they texting, they just doing a lot. But anyway, so that's why I have 2 social media names. Long story longer. I'm super hype about this week's episode for a few reasons. The first is that it's our 200th episode. So
oh yeah.
Shout out to us.
200 episodes in, which is awesome. That's 200 weeks.
Straight, baby.
200 weeks.
Straight. So shout out to us. Shout out to y'all for still being here and listening. We actually have a review this week, so I'm excited about that, or a comment from Celine. She said, found y'all on TikTok and I love it. This was the first episode I heard talking about the softer life, and I love it. It's much needed. Really good content. Keep it up, loves.
Thank you, Celine. And then for everybody else, if you haven't left a comment or a review in a while, or if you are a new listener, we do have quite a few new listeners and subscribers. Please go to Apple Podcasts now. Yeah, Apple Podcasts, and leave us a 5 stars, leave us a review, and we'd be happy to read those on the show as well.
Yeah, because we appreciate y'all growing with us. Lexi, how important is our language, the language we use in our everyday lives?
By that you mean our choice of words? Mm-hmm. I think that the choice of words we use is fairly important. Am I supposed to go further with that, or?
I mean, if you want to, or you can just leave it at fairly important.
I think it's fairly important. Why are you asking?
Because that's what we're talking about today, is how important our words actually are. We always talk about how our perspective is how we literally create the world around us, and our words, we hear everything that we say all day. Your body hears it, your brain hears it, and scientifically, it's important because we start to internalize those things, whether we notice we do or not. And that's kind of what inspired me wanting to do this episode today about our words.
And you said your perspective creates your world around you. So can you go more into that?
Mm-hmm. Meaning, I find $20 on the ground. I'm like, I only found $20 today. That sucks. Normally I find more. Or I could be like, man, I found $20 today. That's lunch. And it's just a slight difference in the perception of something. But that really shapes our emotions and how we react to situations. And that's a very random ass example. But when you think about I got fired from this company, yeah, that really sucks. I got fired. But wow, now I can move to Argentina. I've been wanting to move forever. And look, the way we look at things and our perspective really does shape our entire world.
Mm-hmm. I agree that your perspective on things for sure shapes your emotions, your mood. If you're in a state of gratitude or contentment versus if you're in a state of lack or, feeling miserable or sad about things. But also, what's the differences here in us saying we should try to flip every situation into a positive, or getting into toxic positivity or some of those things, as opposed to it being the language that's the reason, or the language that's important. What's the difference between us saying watch your language, and then us also at the same time believing, because we talked about this before, that you don't have to try to sugarcoat everything.
Yeah, so when I say watch your language, I don't mean lie to yourself about every situation. And we'll get into some examples you can use at work that you can notice in your everyday talk about yourself and relationships, etc. But what I mean is like noticing how we talk about everything every day. So really just looking at the words we choose every day, not just in bad situations, like when stuff sucks, because life is sometimes hard, and that's a fact, and it just kind of is what it is. And so it's not saying like even in those moments you can't use negative words. It's if 90% of the words you use every day are negative, that's super affecting how you're showing up in your life, and you should probably change those things. So it's your everyday language.
Yeah, and one thing you said, or that you inferred maybe, is I think one of the most important things that when we're talking about watching your language and watching what you say, we're not talking about flipping situations, because it's not always about negative to positive. It's literally more so about how are you viewing things and your perspective. How, are you respecting yourself? Are you respecting your work? Are you respecting, you know what I mean? Things like that. It's not necessarily, this doesn't have to do with something happened and now how am I going to look at it? So I think that's important for us to put out there. And for me, I think that, I don't know how I feel about, which it seems like you might believe this, but I don't know exactly how I feel about specifically saying that our language like makes the things happen. But I do for sure understand and experience that the outlook can have you in a better place. And there is something about coming from a better place or a different place that you tend to see more or see things a little differently, and be open to receiving, as opposed to it kind of feeling like certain language shuts things out or like keeps things from growing. I don't know, again, if that's the cause of it, but like it's the space that you're in. So that's kind of like how I feel about language and the connection with action and like The Secret and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, and I agree with what you're saying. Absolutely. I am more in the camp of like, it really does create things, and our words have so much power, like the words that we say. And the reason I say that is like our brains are wonderful instruments. They're great tools. And if you tell my brain, if you like wake up and like, oh, I gotta go to work again, every day sucks, your brain is going to look for everything that sucks. It's like reticular activation system. If you're like, man, I want to, you start thinking I want to buy, a red Range Rover, and you start seeing them everywhere. It's your brain looking for those things that you say. And so I think there is something to, very scientifically, the basic words that we use for things and how we even describe things, that we start to look for it in our life. And then it becomes kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense.
And maybe it's more when it's coming from more of like a negative space, maybe it's more subconscious that you're not thinking about, like that your brain tries to make those things happen or looks for those things. Whereas I feel like when you're, I don't know, maybe it's still subconscious that you see the positive ones too. But I feel like when you're more open to it, you're just not like as clouded by the negative things.
Exactly.
Do you have an example of a time that you recognized how your language was affecting a particular like situation or anything specific like that?
Yeah, I could be here all day, but I won't be because I respect all of our time. The one I would say is top of mind is my relationship with my mom. Because it's been rocky. We're both growing as people, and we, had some things to grow through. And I remember there was a time when every time she would call, I'd be like, it's always something new with her. You know what I'm saying? And I would think that and say that and be talking to my friends about it. And then it was always something, you know what I'm saying? Like whatever energy I'm bringing to the situation, whatever words I was using to describe it were, then I challenged myself to be curious. And so instead of using those same words, like she always does this, or oh my God, she's always complaining or whatever, I just allowed myself to be curious what could be the situation. So I'd be like, man, I wonder what, how my mom is feeling today. And in that space that I gave her, and I don't know if it's self-fulfilling prophecy or just me opening up my mind to new possibilities, like it wasn't always like that anymore. Like even the words that I used to describe her, just by changing how I would talk about her in our relationship.
That is a good example. Who are you talking to her about, though?
It would be like my best friend, because her and her mom have had a difficult relationship in the past. And so it was something we could talk about with each other, or, like with partners or stuff. And they like ask, oh, how's your mom? And I'm like, oh, she's always complaining about something, and so then when I changed it, but even to myself, like even the thoughts that I would think about it, like whenever I would see that.
That's a big place to watch your language too, where sometimes it just happens before you're really thinking too hard about it. Is like when people ask you how something's going, like they ask you how a person is or ask you how you are or like how's work going, or, you know, I feel like a lot of times people tend to go towards like a negative maybe, and or yeah, like it just kind of shows like that's where your mind is. So this really also shows, I mean, obviously your language is, it starts in the mind, but it sounds like you had to consciously or like with intent first look at how you're thinking about things, and that you kind of had it in like a negative cycle, and then giving it a chance to get out of that disappointment loop by saying something different, which allowed you to at least think about something different. Or maybe the thinking came first and the language next. But you have to be intentional about both of them and how they connect. So, of course, as always, thinking about this week, like with your language, when people ask you a question, taking that pause or hearing what you had to say first, and then thinking about, you know, what language you're using and how you could maybe say things differently. And then I think Carlie has a whole lot of examples. So I know I'm taking up too much time probably at the top of the episode about this. But we probably can get right to some examples after this, because it's very slight sometimes. It's not necessarily that we're saying, you know, you have to like completely change what you're saying, but like it's those slight words. There's some words you can look for, and when you catch yourself saying them, recognizing that that might be limiting or negative, etc. For me, one of the ways that language has affected my life as far as work, of course, is like over the years, I've definitely gained much more confidence in my work and talking about my work. You know, it's kind of hard to talk about something that you're not really feel very sure about, or maybe not even not feeling sure, but like you don't claim like, you know, what it's doing or the positive about it. And so I've gotten caught where people have told me, like, don't call that little. Like when I say, like, oh, yeah, you know, I got a little thing I'm working on. Or if, you know, people ask me about a question about work or business, and, you know, you might kind of downplay it or whatever. So there's just different things that I've noticed that when I talk about things differently, A, I'm showing more confidence. B, the other person, like, actually believes in me a little more, is excited for you, etc. And it also allows you to feel good about like the work you're actually doing. So that would be my example. One thing that Jack Schaefer said is words cannot change reality, but they can change how people perceive reality. They create filters through which people view the world around them. So I think that summarizes kind of what I think about how words can affect at least the way that you move through the world because of your perception being a little bit more open.
Mm-hmm. And that's like what's most important. And I loved in your example, you had the point of how people would respond to you differently when you use different words, because you are emitting different energy, you know, using more confidence, not downplaying yourself. So you create space for them to, you know, believe in you, to be excited about what you're working on and doing.
If things. It sounds like you don't care, then people don't care. And I notice that a lot too when people talk to me. You know, have you ever gotten a DM where someone be like, I know you wouldn't talk to me, but I just want to tell you.
It's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, yeah, why would I? Like, this is weird. Or I know I'm not good enough, but, and it's like, this is the worst thing ever. Like,
or even outside the DMs, but like even in interviews or like on the teams when you're like working with people and they're like, well, you know, I'm not good at this, and it's like, oh God.
Yeah, like just don't do that. Yeah. You just didn't even have to say that at all.
Exactly. And I'm a nerd, so I like to do research, and I think you've probably seen this on social media, but if not, there's a Japanese scientist named Masaru Emoto, and he started doing these experiments with words and objects. So he did one with snowflakes, he did one with rice, and you can find out more information about him in his books, The Hidden Messages in Water. But he spoke to like frozen water for a period of 24 hours. He had his two samples, and one, he spoke words of like, I love you, peace, joy, like different words to them. And then the other ones, he was like, you know, I hate you, fear, hate, you know, he was just using very negatively charged words. And so the next day, the side that he was speaking love to formed very beautiful like snowflakes. Like, you know, you think of the very intricate designs and how they're all different and very beautiful. And that was one. And then the other ones there was a noticeable difference. They didn't have any of the intricate designs. They were all gray and clumped up, and they didn't actually form the beautiful snowflakes. And so then he redid that test with some rice, same thing. I love you, da 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 da. And then the next day, the I love you rice and then like the peaceful rice was all nice and fluffy and white. And then the other rice that he was speaking like the hateful words to was all mushy and gray and had started to form like nasty looking things in it. And so it's like when you think about that, like words really do emit energy and frequencies and power. And so just, looking that up. But if you want to research, his name is Masaru Emoto. And so now we'll get into some of the examples, which I think are the most important. And first we'll get into like looking at your own language. And so whenever we go through these next couple things, like listen to them and see what you notice in your own life and kind of see what resonates with you, because that might be a good starting place to start switching your words.
Yeah, so some of the phrases and words you might be using that could show lack, that you don't feel that something is good enough, that you don't have enough of it, that you won't have it, etc. So if you find yourself talking about how, oh, well, he has a good hair, he can do that, or my hair isn't good, or I can't do that with my hair, I can't afford that, well, that's a little too expensive. Or even sometimes you might see this through like you kind of downplaying somebody else and what they did, but saying like, oh, that's too fancy for me, or oh, I don't think I could afford that, or yeah, well, I can't take a couple of days off because everything will fall apart. Those types of words are putting basically out there that, or they're reflecting that you don't feel that you can do something, or that whatever you're doing or have isn't good enough, or that you don't have enough. And so watch that as part of a representation that you're coming from a place of lack.
Mm-hmm. That's a huge one. And that's actually kind of what got me thinking about this episode, these two. So a very similar one, I was talking to my friend, Coach Ash. She was actually on a podcast, so y'all should look her episode up. But I was like, I'm working on this little project. Same thing you were talking about. She said, oh, whoa, we don't do little projects. we don't do that. I need you to fix that. I'm like, damn, you're right. But then even something, what did I say? Someone came over and we were cooking. I was like, oh, yeah, I got the good butter today, because I spent a little extra, got the Kerrygold. And they were like, well, why is it good? Why? Because they've like, I noticed that you use words to make certain things in your life sound good or better than other ones. And then, like, why isn't everything in your life just good? Why is it only this or only that? And I was like, oh, man, that's like a big one. Another area to kind of look for in your life is areas where you might not be all the way truthful. And this might be a whole other episode of things, but like saying things that you don't mean, or telling half truths to people, kind of like lying about how you feel or what you need, might be an area to kind of watch your words.
And so if you're lying about how you feel, what is that? Just you kind of either gaslighting yourself or kind of putting yourself out of alignment, I'm guessing.
Exactly. Yeah, you're not being truthful with yourself and with the people in your life. So it's like that's an area you should probably watch too.
Mm-hmm. Negative language is an obvious one, and there's lots of different ways that you could see that. Another one is when you find yourself using a lot of superlatives, when you're really defining that somebody always does this, or you never help me around the house. When you use words that are definite like that, or that are like all encompassing or kind of generalizing, that a person always or never does a thing, then that one thing is that that discredits all of the times that they may have, or that you can or have, etc. And another thing is that doesn't exactly make people feel appreciated. Or again, if you're talking about yourself also, it's like you're not even really appreciating. And you may be kind of pushing away by not showing that appreciation, by kind of putting that general statement. So that's one thing to watch in your language as well.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't like superlatives, and I try to always catch myself. Also noticing how judgmental you are, or when you label things. So this food is terrible. My day sucked. Man, they're lazy. I feel worthless. Like, I suck at this. It's like, I'm not good at X. It's like noticing how this definite language even goes into like how you label yourself and label like what's going on in your life.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about this in one episode, and I remember the example was like talking about a movie, and saying like, oh, that movie wasn't good. But it's like, actually, I didn't really enjoy that movie because of whatever. That's a totally different approach to really kind of saying, not the same thing, but like it's saying what you really actually feel is that I didn't care for that movie. That wasn't for me. As opposed to just that negative energy. I make fun of my brother all the time because everything I say, like, oh, I hate that. He says that first. And so now he gets to the point where anytime I'm like, oh man, we can make this for lunch or something. And he's like, oh, I hate the blah, blah, blah. And then he'll just start laughing because he already recognizes and like, oh, there you go, hopping right back into that mode. So it's something that you do like kind of just do sometimes. And you don't recognize that there's this energy behind it. It's kind of like grumpiness and kind of like, I'm not happy with my life. I'm not trying to put that all on like a person for being, saying those things, but like it kind of does channel like a type of energy I feel where it's just like you're not content in general sometimes. So if you're that type of person, just watch that.
Mm-hmm. Another one, and I was laughing because that was definitely me. I was like, man, that food was terrible. I'm like, well, actually, like, I didn't have to bring all that negative energy for whatever reason. And to your point, like, I could feel it kind of in my chest, like, yeah, man, that sucked. You kind of get growly, like it sucked or whatever.
And you're owning it too much. I think that's, maybe that was part of the episode. I don't remember. But, like, your language also keeps things at the distance of, like, it is what it is. Not saying you have to be or should be nonchalant, or not saying that you can't feel things or be like, this food was disgusting. Like, okay, cool. But, it's kind of like putting it more, it's not staying detached from it, and it's not just like letting it be a moment and wipe it away. It kind of drains a little bit more of you.
Mm-hmm, and leaves a mark. Another one is if you're always presenting things as problems and never as opportunities, like that's just another area to look at. Like, oh man, someone messed up the slide. This is gonna set us back for 2 weeks. It's like, all right, bro. Like, okay, if it's always something, you should probably check on that too.
And then we probably all know people who are like that in our like work life, probably, where it's like it seems like sometimes people just always like see an issue, and it's like, okay, I need you to bring like some solutions to this, or like come with a different energy, just because that also in a group or for your work can bring morale down as well. So that's something to watch. And then lastly, self-deprecating words, which is what we kind of mentioned earlier when I was talking about DMs. Sometimes people feel more comfortable making themselves the butt of a joke because then it's like, I'm going to do it before they do. Or I feel like, okay, I can be in ownership of like, I'm the short, goofy one or whatever. And kind of fall into those roles. But that also kind of leaves you in that role. I know I'm not good enough, but it's just like, why would you say that, So think about how you're talking, especially about yourself. And if anything, you should be your biggest fan and not the one being self-deprecating.
Yeah. And that the energy, just the different words bring, like not only being your biggest fan, but also people responding to words. Like there was a lot of scientific research about how even positively phrasing negative situations improves relationships and communication between people. It even imprints on your brain better. And so now we're going to get into some actual examples of ways to flip
Say this
things
instead of that.
Exactly. So for let's say, something happened with your car, and instead of saying, oh, the damage won't be fixed for a week, say you can pick your car up next week.
Mm-hmm. Another thing to do is use it in positive words in a negative form instead. So say, well, it's not as reasonable as we had hoped, instead of saying this is too expensive for us. People react better to positive sounding words, to the way you phrase things. And definitely take notes of this part of the episode, because where it's really easier to practice this and put this into play is with your emails or texts. A lot of these things over, I don't know, maybe the last 8 to 12 months, I've been more cautious about how I speak to particular people or in particular relationships, because I recognize like certain energy I don't necessarily want to put into the conversation. And so I think it's easiest to do this with looking at text or with your emails, and you start to notice what you're saying and being like, that's not powerful, or that's not positive, or that's not strong, or whatever. And really practicing saying things better that way. So that was the second one.
Mm-hmm. The third one is to use modifiers to make things seem less or smaller. So for example, like this will cause a huge problem for us. as opposed to saying a better way to say that is like, that might cause a slight problem for us, or that might put a hiccup in our schedule. Using slight here helps the speaker to be a little bit softer in communicating informations, and phrases like a bit of, sort of, kind of might have the same effect.
If you're not really vibing with somebody making a decision, or you want to kind of make a suggestion to improve a situation, a better thing to say is, well, wouldn't it be better to do this, or couldn't we do this? And honestly, I actually don't even like wouldn't it be better to. I would say, well, how do you think about, or what do you think about this, as well as an option, instead of saying, well, we should do this instead, or obviously, and telling somebody that their idea is bad or whatever. But that's a little bit more of a diplomatic way to put something else out there and to see if you can get a better reaction.
Yeah, and I think those are always great, especially in work situations or whenever there's a problem, because it provides an opportunity for more solutions and better solutions. And then just a couple more examples in like personal life, work life, and then even at home. So instead of replying like, why not? When someone's like, hey, you want to go to dinner? Why not? Or you can say, sounds good. Another one is thinking about...
what's wrong with saying why not?
The phrases are meant to be positive, but the human brain has a negative bias. And so whenever you say things like, why not? Or how are you? Oh, can't complain. Your brain starts to actually look for those things. Like, oh, I could actually complain about this, but I'm not. And so they're saying scientifically it's better to use positive affirmative as opposed to like a negative affirmative.
Okay.
And so instead of like saying, can't complain, say, everything's going well, thanks. Or, I'm doing pretty well, or whatever. And so that helps your brain to not focus on the negative in a situation.
Okay. If you actually are in the positive space, it's like, if you are, make it actually positive.
Yep.
Another thing that's important is when we use too much hyperbole, or when we expand the feeling of something. We're like, oh man, I'm starving. And we're like, I'm exhausted. Or like, we use words like that, and it's like, you ain't nowhere near starving. You had, and this is me, you had like 8 donuts 2 minutes ago, like, or, it's not really that deep. Or sometimes you are exhausted, and that's just a fact. But a lot of times, think about that. This is something I come across a long time ago, but like when you find yourself telling somebody like, I'm exhausted, or talking about how tired you are, like actually stop for a second and think about like, oh, can I kind of keep going? Or I'm not really like out of the way exhausted. But another thing you might can say instead of I'm exhausted is, I could use some rest, or I need to get a little rest, or I'm feeling tired, but not necessarily taking it to 100, which we do for storytelling, and that's just language in general, but kind of respecting like what things really mean.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important, because I am like an exaggerator of feelings. Like, oh man, I'm whatever, and it's like, are you really?
Yeah, it ain't that deep.
It ain't that deep, bro. Another thing, so now switching.
And that makes it better too for like when you are, you know what I mean? I feel like everybody's so extra. I'm trying to catch my own words. Everybody's not always, but sometimes people can be real extra when you speak to them, and it makes it hard to like actually care when it really, or know, like when they really
to differentiate, like when someone actually is exhausted.
Yeah. Like I feel like in general, maybe you might disagree, but like in general, because of the way I talk to people, like if I actually told someone like that I had an issue or something was going on, like me even mentioning it in a certain way, that they would actually know that was really something, that was going on. And so I think it's hard just because it's like everybody's just like, "Ooh, we all exhausted and everything," and it's like, yeah, to a degree, there's definitely some mental exhaustion going around. It's been a crazy couple of years, but also it's like, when you're speaking to people, really be careful about like what you're putting, those labels you're putting on that.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree with that. Yeah, I feel like if you said something, I would believe it. Like words carry weight, and if you always, it's like the boy who cried wolf. If you're always exhausted, then we're not gonna know when you actually need some help or something's going on.
Yeah, and I want to say one more thing about that too, because I have a colleague that I literally can I expect it every time they hop into a meeting, or I'm seeing them for something about work. It's almost like they put on like as soon as they have a meeting, they're like, or like, ooh, y'all. Like it's always like this, like, bro, like go take a break then. You know what I mean? After a while, it's like, I know it's every time you hop in, it's like, it's almost like, here we go, or we're in this meeting. And it's just, I don't know how to really explain, like, but that that feels like a certain energy where it's like, if you always tired, like do something different. Like, cause I might be feeling kind of blah about like, I don't want to be in this meeting either, but coming in with it with a different energy completely doesn't make me feel as I'm like, you're coming in here looking. So definitely something to pay attention to. Like in certain circumstances, do you always like put on like a kind of vibe or like, whatever that vibe might be? Not saying you have to be extra excited or fake excited, but notice like these tropes we kind of fall into sometimes in different situations.
Yeah, because I think we've all probably been in a space where someone does deflate. It's like the whole energy of the room is like it kind of comes out with either woe is me or being tired or things. So just noticing, how it can also affect the people around you. And then kind of switching into some work examples. Focusing on what can be done versus like what can't be done is very helpful in a situation. So it's like, oh man, I forgot. I guess we're screwed. It's like, okay, well, actually, let me finish it by the end of the day. And next time I'll set a reminder to make sure that it gets done on time or whatever.
Although I will add to that I would prefer to also hear somebody acknowledge that, oh, I forgot. And then here's what's going to be next. So I wouldn't necessarily put that as like a say this instead of, but there is like a point where if something's negative or something hasn't gotten done or whatever, you don't have to just like sit there and talk down about yourself for 10 minutes or talk about all the things that happen, whatever, because nobody cares about that. But you can acknowledge it and then let us know like, okay, I'll get it done or I'll set this reminder or whatever.
Yeah, definitely own your stuff. Another one is, so for example, this is an email. Instead of saying, unfortunately, it will be impossible to finish the project on time because of the problems that some people are causing submitting their work late, you could just ask, can everyone turn in their portion of the project by Thursday so we can get the work done on time and hit the deadline?
Mm-hmm. And that's just a good direct way to speak to people anyway, is asking them, hey, where are we with this? Instead of like, this was due an hour ago or it's due tomorrow, what's going on? That's giving a different type of energy.
And email is a great place to start practicing like and working on this positive language because you can edit your words before you send them out. Like I know I'm the person who has to go back and take out like 2 to 3 exclamation points because I am a generally excitable person, but not everybody wants to be, rah-rah in an email. Another example is and this could be either talking to a person or emailing, but hey, sorry, I just kind of wanted to check in on the project, to see if it'll be finished by the end of the week. So instead of approaching something like that, create urgency and use clarity and just say, how's the project coming along? I'm looking forward to it getting finished on Friday.
Mm-hmm. And that just kind of empowers people too, of just setting an expectation that hopefully was agreed upon by everybody. In the home area, there's different ways to speak to people. Also, we probably should get, and I know just who to add on here for that, but we should probably talk to a gentle parenting person because a lot of this and how you speak to others, especially kids or younger people, it can get really hard. Like when you got kids running around all day, not being bad, being kids. See, thank you. Being kids and making a lot of noise and enjoying themselves. When that may not always like go with your flow, that can be, I can imagine, like we all understand why our parents be like, just go to the other room or just like, just shut up or whatever. Yeah, go outside and all that. Like, I get it. But man, gentle parenting, whew, that's a lot to unlearn. And I think it mostly has to do with this language. It has to do with language. It has to do with how does it seem like you're blaming somebody or telling somebody to do something or honoring what they want to do or how they feel. And that doesn't have to be in a way that undermines you as an authority, which is what a lot of people don't understand and don't get about that. So yeah, some of the home things kind of made me think about that, and maybe that could be a future episode where we have a guest.
I would love that.
Yeah, but some of the things around the house, asking you, please take that ball outside is different than kind of getting at somebody or yelling at them about, you're always hitting the door with that ball or don't throw the ball inside or whatever. Another part about that is instead of telling people what you don't want them to do, just basically telling them what you do like or what you do want them to do. Because people who respect you and want to have a good relationship with you they want to do things that are going to make that space okay.
Yeah, and that really shifts the energy from focusing on what you don't want, like don't do that, as opposed to your desired action. And this is good for adults too, and ups your chances of a positive outcome. Another thing that I think is important is, like, again, if y'all are parents, unless the kids are in imminent danger, explaining the reason why might help them understand why not to do something. So, for example, instead of saying no, like, can I have ice cream? No. Say, I know you really like ice cream, but eating too much isn't healthy, and talking to them about that. I remember when I was little, we had went to a buffet and I tried to get mashed potatoes, like French fries and something else, and my mom was like, nah, dog, you can't have 3 types of potatoes. And I was like, why? I like potatoes. And she was like, well, because these are all carbs and your body needs different things to help you function, so it was like this teaching moment. Again, I wasn't about to die, so what I'm saying, she could like take the time and explain things to me. But then I thought about it as I got older, and I would try to make my plates more balanced as opposed to just like potato, even though potatoes are delightful.
That's definitely not something, like, kids don't care if you're like, oh, it's not healthy. Okay. Right. Like, yeah. So that, I think that's where I would definitely want to talk to one of those folks who's an expert there, because still that kid's still going to want to do certain things, right? Like, you can't take away certain desires or experiences from folks. But like you said, those are things that can potentially stick with you. And like, as you're getting older, or maybe in that moment, the way you're being taught, something can click for you, or you do understand, or you're at least open to understanding and listening, and it's a better relationship than feeling like somebody's just telling you no, or you don't know what's going on, or like, okay, you're always telling me what to do. Setting kind of like a different type of vibe into the relationship.
Yeah. So take some time this week. Notice how you're using your words. Notice if you see any of that lack, any minimizing, any self-deprecation, like any of these things. Hit us at Carlie's Couch on all the platforms. Let us know, what you're kind of working on and focusing on this week.
And I would also say, if you are listening to other people, because sometimes it's easy to hear it with other folks, like if it's somebody you feel comfortable with, try to hear it in other people as well. I think sometimes it's easier that way, to hear what other people are saying and then recognize, like, oh, do I say that too? Or I've said that, or I've acted like that. That's how that feels. That's how that looks. So pay attention also to other people's speech as well.
Yeah, and send this to someone, if you have that relationship, send it to them. Let them know to work on their language. I love that I'm in a place where all my friends know, who I'm trying to be and my idealized self, and kind of catch me whenever I'm minimizing myself, my business, what's going on, or any of that stuff. So, let's all level up together. And then the question of the week comes from Like You cards, which are from Kiara Imani. She was on a couple of episodes recently. She has a book dropping in August, but she has these cards that are like a question game between friends, and I was laughing at a reel they had that came out with this question. If you came with a warning label, what would it say?
My warning label would say something to the effect of give it time to open up, something like that.
Oh, I like that. Makes me think of like a flower. Give it time. Mine was funny. Mine was going to say, warning, short stories, or let me tell you something real quick, is never quick, and we'll give you the entire background of things you did not need to know first.
Accurate.
True.
Yeah, true. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for our 200th episode. We hope that you will continue to vibe with us for many more episodes to come. Please share the podcast, give us a 5-star, give us a review, leave a comment, ask a question, hit us up on social, and we will see you next week.
Y'all can leave us voicemails too. Bye, y'all.